Hello and welcome to the Tennessee Informer. Well, tomorrow is the big day, Election Day 2024. And among other issues, we'll be voting on whether or not we're going to close our border and defend our sovereignty and security, or to allow our country to continue to be overrun by illegal aliens from all over the world, many of which are violent criminals or terrorists. Our guest today is Jessica Vaughan, Director of Policy Studies for the Center for Immigration Studies, CIS. She has worked for CIS since 1992. Her area of expertise is immigration policy and operations, covering topics such as visa programs, immigration benefits, and immigration enforcement and public safety. In 2022, she teamed up with the University of Houston's Borders, Trade, and Immigration Institute and Sam Houston State University's Institute for Homeland Security to launch the annual conference to combat human trafficking. She's directed a Department of Justice-funded project on U.S. immigration law enforcement and transnational gang suppression. In addition, she's an instructor for senior law enforcement officer training seminars at Northwestern University Center for Public Safety in Illinois, and she routinely speaks at law enforcement and academic conferences around the country. She has testified before Congress dozens of times. Most recently, she testified on the consequences of catch and release at the border. As a guest of the U.S. House Committee on Oversight and Accountability and on Biden and Mayorkas' Open Border, Advancing Cartel Crime in America, as a guest of the U.S. House Committee on Homeland Security, she advises federal and state lawmakers and agencies on immigration issues, as well as citizens groups interested in understanding immigration policies and impacts. Prior to joining the center, Mrs. Vaughan was a Foreign Service Officer with the State Department, where she served in Belgium, Trinidad, and Tobago. Her articles have appeared in the Washington Post, New York Times, National Review, Boston Globe, The Economist, San Francisco Chronicle, The National Interest, Arizona Republic, and others. She is frequently cited in news media reports on immigration and has appeared on NPR, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and PBS's NewsHour. She also has a master's degree from Georgetown University and a bachelor's degree from Washington College in Maryland. Jessica, thanks for being with us today, and how are you tonight?
I am doing well, Dave. Thank you.
Well, we do appreciate you taking the time, and it's great to have a certified expert on the issue on the show with us.
Well, it's my pleasure. I mean, it's such an important issue in this election and for the future of our country. So I'm so pleased that you were interested in having me on, and I'm glad your audience will be interested in this.
Absolutely. So let's get right to it. Let's talk about the number of illegal aliens that have arrived during the Biden administration. I think we actually have some slides to go with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Biden-Harris border policies were a remarkable change in border security and really brought about a historic rise in illegal immigration to the point where it's higher than legal immigration right now. And you can see what this chart shows you. This is a kind of a famous chart now because it's the one that Donald Trump was pointing to during the assassination attempt. But it shows what a difference policies make. Illegal immigration is not some uncontrollable force of nature. We can control the border, and policies make a difference. And you can see the ebb and flow in illegal immigration on that chart, that it was very low when Donald Trump took office. It rose after a little while for a variety of reasons, but then he got control of it again. But as soon as Joe Biden came in and on the first day signed that moratorium on immigration enforcement, the numbers started to go through the roof, and they have remained there pretty much for the last almost 4 years under the Biden-Harris policies. And I have to emphasize, this was not some accident or a result of incompetence. These were deliberate policy choices, executive orders signed by Joe Biden, carried out by Alejandro Mayorkas, supported by Kamala Harris and everyone else in the Biden administration. And the result has been really communities being overwhelmed, trying to accommodate this massive flow of people. And it's more than 7 million people who've arrived in less than 4 years illegally. That's not even counting legal immigration. Meant 2 million of them, we have no idea who they are because they're the so-called gotaways. But 5.5 million of them were deliberately allowed to come here, even though they are inadmissible. They have no basis for qualifying to come here, but were allowed to come in anyway. And once people knew, all around the world knew that those were the policies, then they started swarming for our border, and the result has just been disastrous.
You know, the federal government supposedly has the responsibility for maintaining our borders, and my understanding is they have plenary power in terms of immigration, meaning they're the final word on it, that they get to call the shots. Now, I have some serious issues with that, but my question is, how can the federal government, and the president in particular, who has been apparently delegated this authority from Congress, I'm assuming, to make these, I don't understand how a policy decision can legally ignore all the laws that you are sworn to uphold as the president. I mean, I know that was obviously an impeachable offense, but there's nothing legal in what he did, correct? Or is it perfectly legal for a president to use policy to violate the law?
Well, I agree with you. It's hard to understand how a president can get away with just not enforcing certain laws, and with creating immigration programs to allow in anyone he wants to. You're right, Congress has the authority to decide which categories of people get in and how many of them can come in. The only category that the president has control over is annual refugee admissions. But these people coming across the border are not refugees, have not been identified by the UN as people in need of protection or resettlement or people who are being persecuted. They're economic migrants opportunistically coming because we're letting them do it. But the problem is that no one has found a way to actually stop most of these policies. Now, there have been some lawsuits against the Biden administration that have been able to stop certain things like the expansion of DACA, and certain other policies sort of narrow around the edges. And there have been federal judges and appeals courts who have said that some of these policies are improper, these entry programs, but no one has been able to actually make the Biden administration stop letting all these people come in. And the reason is that they justify it by saying that as a federal agency, they have the discretion to decide who they're going to enforce immigration laws against when their resources are limited. There are federal judges who disagree with this, but the process is so slow through the federal courts that it is just, there's some lawsuits pending, but it's, even in 4 years, no one has been able to stop this mass influx because the Biden administration just says, oh, well, we don't have the money to do all this. And, and Congress has not seen fit to defund any of these programs. So they continue to get away with doing whatever they want.
But they do have money because they're using our tax dollars to import these people here. They fly them in, they bus them in, they put them up, so they've got money.
Right, but they're not using that money for its intended purpose, which is to send people home rather than allow them to come in, and transporting them around the country and issuing work permits to them and allowing them to receive federally funded welfare programs for certain countries like Haiti and Venezuela and Cuba. They managed to find money for all of that, and they managed to find millions, actually billions of dollars to pay government contractors to participate in their resettlement schemes and to bus people around the country and give them services and so on. But they are not lifting a finger hardly to send people home. Now, there are some deportation flights happening now, and there are some people being turned back at the border, but it's still a minority of the people who are trying to come here illegally. And at a certain point, hardly any of that was happening. They've picked it up in the last, I don't know, 6 months or so when it became a real political liability and they had to
Right.
start thinking about the election. And when some of the state and local governments where the migrants were arriving started to complain. That's only then did they start reining in some of these policies a little bit.
And they're not necessarily sending their best and brightest either. So I'm just curious, do we know how many known criminals, suspected terrorists that we're getting across the border?
Well, the Border Patrol has caught hundreds of people who crossed the border illegally, and when they did the checking, and when they took their fingerprints, they realized that they were on the terror watch list. That's of the ones who were apprehended. We have no idea, for example, how many of the 2 million gotaways might be terrorists or involved in crime or criminal gangs or cartels. We just have no idea because, they've just made it into the country because the Border Patrol was ordered to process all of the families and unaccompanied minors and Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, Ukrainians, Afghans, and all the other people coming across who wanted to be caught. But the ones we really need to worry about are the ones who didn't want to get caught. And those are a lot of the ones who are causing problems in communities around this country. But even they even let some of the criminals in. There was a prison breakout in Venezuela back in 2021. And a lot of that, well, actually, the prison breakout was sooner than that. But once the Biden administration opened up the border, this particular prison gang from Venezuela decided to focus on smuggling Venezuelans into the United States rather than into Colombia and Peru and Chile and all these other places in South America. They realized they could make more money bringing people in, and then they realized that they themselves could make it into this country and start setting up new criminal gangs and cells of their gang within the United States. And in fact, this has played out in Middle Tennessee, where they set up a sex trafficking ring of Venezuelan women who thought they were coming here to do jobs like waitressing or working in stores or something like that, and instead were forced into the sex trade. That's one of the biggest federal cases right now against this Venezuelan gang called Tren de Aragua, is right in the Nashville area.
When was that? For some reason,
It's going on right now. It was just a couple of months ago that they actually made the arrests of the gang members. But this gang operates very differently from some other transnational gangs that we're more familiar with, like MS-13 and 18th Street and the cartels. They don't identify themselves. They don't brag about being in the gang. They prefer to be low key about it. So it takes some time for law enforcement agencies to figure out who's connected to whom to actually determine that they are part of this Venezuelan prison gang. Now that, their way of operating of, enticing these Venezuelan women up here and charging them $10,000 to be smuggled into the United States. And then once they're here, threatening them and saying, well, it's really going to be $20,000 and you're going to have to work it off out of this Motel 6 in Murfreesboro is where it happened. That's, it takes sometimes to unravel that by local law enforcement to figure out what's going on, especially when we don't know much about the gang. We do know that they're violent thugs and very dangerous and brutal. And we're finding there are now about 100 cases nationwide, but one of the biggest is in Tennessee.
now that's the same Venezuelan group that took over some apartment complexes in Colorado, correct?
Yes, correct. Same gang, and also attacked some police officers in Manhattan, tried to carry out an assassination of a retired police officer in Miami. Some brutal murders in Wisconsin. They are bad news.
I think we've got a slide on that one. Yeah, okay. So, you mentioned that we did catch some of the bad guys. Of course, there's the ones that the gotaways that we have no clue about. But even some of the ones that we may have checked out, just because they don't currently have a record or we weren't able to pull up a record, that doesn't mean they're good guys either. So, we have no idea who we're letting into the country.
That is exactly right. There's no way that the Border Patrol can be sure of the identity of people coming across. They're tossing all of their documents before they cross the border because they don't want to be caught with documents for a couple of reasons. Either because they know they'd be sent back or detained if the Border Patrol knew who they actually were, or because they want to apply for asylum and they know, and their documents show that they were living in a safe third country before they came here, and they don't want anyone to know that. But especially with these Venezuelans and Cubans and people coming from countries where we don't have a relationship that is strong enough for us to get information on who people are in those countries. I mean, it's like, the Border Patrol will run their fingerprints, but it will only tell them if someone has a criminal record in the United States. Now, there's plenty of those too that they're catching, but we have no idea what people were doing in their home country before they try to cross into our country. It's very difficult to know who these people are, and usually they're not volunteering that information if it's derogatory.
Right. And we've got them from all over the world. This is not just Latin America. You've got the Chinese, you've got Ukrainians, Russians, Haitians, other people from African countries. I mean, it's all over.
Every country.
Countries, and a lot of countries that hate us. So they don't come here with good intentions, a lot of them. But the door is wide open, and these people are not being monitored.
No, and they might say, oh, I'm from Colombia, but they're really from Iran or Syria or Uzbekistan or, we really cannot verify their identity unless at some point later on, maybe, some prints were collected in the war in Iraq and, they finally get around to checking those and they're like, oh, this person tried to kill American soldiers at some point. That has actually happened. Or one case of a guy from Colombia who was a member of a designated terrorist organization. Border Patrol was so busy on the day he was caught, they did the background check, but they didn't have time to check their email. They just let the guy go. And then at a certain point, they, got through their email inbox and were like, ooh, we got a hit on this guy. Oh, no. And it took weeks for this guy to be tracked down in Florida by ICE after they realized who they had. And that's just a function of them being so overwhelmed and all of the protocols that would normally be in place for vetting people, keeping them in custody until we, feel, that we've done some vetting. All of that goes out the window when, it's a complete catch and release system like we've seen for the last more than 3 years.
And of course, the timing couldn't be worse. We already have enough issues with confidence in our elections, and our borders are wide open. So I'm sure that at least a good chunk of these people that are not eligible to vote. They're no doubt voting in some of our elections. So that's some added angst for what's being allowed.
That's right. There have been some cases of people admitting to have voted. For example, in Maine recently, the local social service workers were instructed to help people register to vote even when they knew they weren't in the country legally.
Yep.
There are some election integrity issues. I'd like to think that they are small enough in scale that hopefully it's not going to make a difference anywhere, but you never know.
Yeah. Well, it all adds up. Maybe it's not huge in any one place, but 2 or 3% here, 1% here, 3% there. That all adds up. Especially depending on what states we're talking about for the Electoral College. And so there's another thing that we've heard of in the past, and I heard something recently. I can't remember the details about a lot of the diseases that these people bring with them. What are you seeing there?
Well, there are some problems apparently now with some serious strains of tuberculosis that have been detected among the newly arrived migrant populations in places. And there, there are um, some things that have been appearing in schools around the country and associated with people. There's never a lot of information that is shared with the public because the public health and school systems tend to prefer to try to keep that tamped down. So, in their mind, they don't want, they'd rather just treat the people rather than alarm the greater community. I'm not sure if that's the right approach, but that's what happens. But again, when you have so many people coming in who are not fully screened or getting by the Border Patrol, that's one of the consequences is we can't control, what contagious diseases they may have and be spreading throughout communities. And they are traveling in large groups. They're being held in stash houses, with a lot of people in close quarters. And then they're being released into the community without notice to public officials, and sometimes staying in these shelters that also are pretty overcrowded. So it's just a recipe for public health problems, frankly.
Now, AG Skermetti, the AG for Tennessee, this was announced last week that he was able to stop, and his number was 7,000 dangerous aliens from being brought into Tennessee. How did that come about? What can you tell us about that?
Well, I've started reading through all of the documents that were a part of that lawsuit, and I really have to commend the Tennessee Attorney General for going after this situation. It looks like what was happening was that at the end of 2022, in December, ICE had, the Biden administration really had decided that they were going to try to move people out of their detention centers, people who had crossed the border illegally, and they, wanted to just let them all go, kind of clear out all of the ICE detention facilities. And the New Orleans field office was looking for places to release these migrants. And so they started reaching out with to NGOs in Tennessee, specifically the Tennessee Immigrant and Refugee Rights Coalition. And then that group said, well, we are really interested in working with you, ICE, but we want to bring in the mayor of Nashville, and we have to bring in the governor's people as well to make sure that we can all coordinate to accommodate this mass release of what was going to be hundreds of illegal aliens every month. And so it turns out, ICE was saying, first of all, it was shocking to me to see the degree to which ICE was actually colluding with NGOs and a state and local government to release illegal aliens into communities on and trying deliberately in these emails. They say, we are not going public with this. We want to do this very quietly.
But they contacted the NGO, not the state. They didn't call the governor first. They contacted the NGO. And Turk that's one of the worst groups they could have contacted. I mean, they are a far left, pro-illegal, pro-refugee organization in Tennessee. Unfortunately, a lot of our so-called conservative Republicans in our legislature, after all these years, somehow don't know that.
Yeah, and ICE was allowing this relationship and this program to be kind of dictated to them from the NGOs. They wanted to have meetings away from ICE. They wanted ICE to give them information on the people, but they didn't want to share back with ICE about where they were taking the people and who their sponsors were. And it was very disturbing how opaque the process was. And ICE was saying that none of them were going to be criminals, but I've gone through the records that the Tennessee AG obtained, and there are hundreds of criminals within this group of people that were going to be released, that would have been released into the Nashville area had not the AG stepped in and said, wait a minute, really just shining a light on what was going to happen was enough to put the brakes on it, apparently. But, it's an open question with me whether some of these people actually were released or not. I think it's likely that they were released, and probably some of them came to settle in Tennessee. But it was all, something that was supposed to take place without the public knowing about it whatsoever, which is really concerning. That they're releasing people into our communities instead of sending them home, and B, that they, will not share information about it until they are sued. It's really quite concerning. And these are people, a really disproportionate share of these individuals were from Turkey, Colombia, Russia, and Nicaragua. Were the four countries with the most people in that group. And one even convicted of homicide. This was not some benign, humanitarian program. This was really a jailbreak.
So you said that not all 7,000 were dangerous, but apparently at least several hundred. But you also said there's no way to verify that they didn't come?
Right. We don't know what happened to these people. They may have stopped this planned release, but there's nothing saying that ICE can do this on its own without telling anyone and without coordinating with NGOs.
That NGO wouldn't say anything anyway. I guarantee you,
right.
If they told Turk, hey, we're going to send them anyway, I guarantee you Turk wouldn't put up a fight. Hell, okay, we'll help you out, no problem.
They were all happy about it, and they were all on the, agreeing. You can see it in the emails. They say, oh, do not go public on this. They knew what they were doing. They just did not want the public to know what they were doing. And this is a huge problem. We've got, a situation in Chicago that just happened. A guy from Mauritania, who was one of these releases, apparently carried out what was intended to be a terrorist attack by, attacking people in the Jewish people in the community, trying to serve ISIS. So we really, as we've been talking about, we don't know who these people are, and they have no basis for remaining here in this country, no legal basis. They should be sent home.
Absolutely.
We don't have a shortage of legal immigrants. We take in 1 million legal immigrants every year, and we don't have a labor shortage. There's no, reason for this, and it's completely improper and without a legal basis, and yet it's still happening.
Right. Well, the AG also said illegal immigration is a federal issue and that there's not much that states can do. I don't agree with that. I'm curious to your thoughts on that.
I agree with you. And I've observed and worked with a number of different states on this. There are a lot of things that states can do. Yes, immigration is supposed to be a federal responsibility, but the costs of excess immigration fall mainly on state and local governments, in terms of schooling, housing, healthcare, public safety costs. So there are good reasons for states to play a role in immigration control. And there are authorities that states have at their disposal to use. And we have seen some really great examples of that. Tennessee has passed certain laws that aim to discourage illegal immigration, like E-Verify, for example, and laws against allowing people who are in the country illegally to get professional licenses. But there are lots of other things that can be done as well, as we're seeing in Florida, for example. States really need to enforce those deterrents against illegal hiring by employers that you can do by auditing payroll records and looking at tax returns and prosecuting labor trafficking and cracking down on identity theft and all of the crimes that are associated with illegal immigration. Right. I mean, there is an entire criminal infrastructure that supports illegal immigration, from the smugglers to the document brokers to the employers to the money launderers. And all of that is fair game for law enforcement agencies. And really, lawmakers in Tennessee could be providing resources to and encouraging law enforcement agencies to go after these people. There are, really, I think human trafficking is the most insidious form of illegal migration that comes, and there are things that states can do and local governments as well to fight against that. And even just gathering information and publishing information on the cost of illegal migration is something that would be a good public service, whether it's the number of kids in school who don't have status or the number of people getting medical care in hospitals. That's Florida and Texas are doing that. They've simply directed all the hospitals that get Medicaid funding to tell the state, to ask people when they are in the hospital for something, what their status is, and then they can just add up. They're not denying anyone care, right, but they can add up the cost of it, so we know, what this is really costing us. There's a whole long list of things that I've written about and that I've worked with state and local governments on, trying to push back. And I think this is important no matter what happens tomorrow in the election, regardless of whether Donald Trump wins. If Donald Trump wins, his administration is going to need help from state and local governments in enforcing immigration laws, and they're going to be looking for partners in state and local government. If Kamala Harris wins, then states are going to need to look at ways to push back on the abuse of executive authority like we've seen under the Biden-Harris administration. They're going to probably be filing lawsuits to stop some of the most egregious programs that they try to put into place. And so, I really think state lawmakers and the governors in many states should be coming up with things that they are planning to do no matter what happens. Because, first of all, we've got these millions of people who've been allowed to settle here illegally, and it's going to take a while, even if laws start to be enforced, for the feds to do that, but also because of the enormous fiscal costs that have to be borne by state and local taxpayers. And I don't believe that it's necessary to go around and forcibly remove every single illegal alien from the country. But what we know from experience is that when states do get involved and there is more immigration enforcement and people start to realize that they run the risk of being found out and possibly arrested and removed, or if it becomes hard, if they can't get a job, can't get a driver's license, can't get a professional license, can't support themselves here, they're going to get the message and go home on their own. And that's how we get what we call attrition, by ramping up enforcement a little bit and passing these deterrents and discouragements to illegal settlement, and it becomes much less of a problem. And then ICE and law enforcement agencies can focus on the criminals within this population.
I do want to talk some more about Trump's plan of deportation, but I got to hit a few things on Tennessee, specific to Tennessee. You mentioned the professional license bill that was it was basically revoked this year. The bill this year. It was passed in the Senate by Kerry Roberts. I can't recall who carried it in the House, but that bill undid the professional license bill. It reversed the professional license bill that was passed by our legislature in 2022. In 2022, that's a year after Biden's in office. Floodgates have been opened. I mean, it's obvious what they're trying to do. And in our state of Tennessee, our legislature passed and the governor signed a bill giving professional licenses to illegal aliens. Now,
right. Even as the Attorney General was joining all these lawsuits from all the red states.
And well, here's the thing. Now, Skrmetti didn't come in until after this session, so he was not the AG at the time it was passed in 22. Before that, we had Herbert Slattery, and he was terrible. But I do know that the AG Skrmetti was made aware of this situation not long after he came in office. I know that for a fact. And he never did make a ruling on it because it would have been real easy to have ended it right there. It violated some existing state law, and it violated federal law as well on the professional license having to do with giving benefits of citizenship or citizen benefits to illegal aliens. But that happened. You mentioned the E-Verify. We did pass some E-Verify legislation, but I can tell you the level of it was so high as to be meaningless. I mean, if you don't have a number for E-Verify of, a small business that has like a single digit requirement to report, if it's 35, 40, 50, that's not going to apply to a lot of your small businesses in Tennessee. So that one in Tennessee, it may have meant something to some of the bigger industries. It might mean more in other states. Didn't mean a whole lot in Tennessee. And Tennessee is our legislature is very much in the grip of the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, I think some of them believe they actually are there to represent the Chamber of Commerce. So we do have a big problem with that. There's a lot more I think we could do. Maybe there's some things
those employers ought to be ashamed of themselves if they are if they are allowing labor trafficking to occur within their establishments. And that's another way to go after this. The state really could make more of an effort to audit compliance with E-Verify or pursue leads of human trafficking that may be happening in the workplace. And, I think there's a good case to be made for going after some of these more egregious employers and making an example of them. And what I've seen after decades of doing this is other employers pay attention to that and say, you know what happened to Tyson Foods or, other companies where they were looking the other way at massive illegal employment, which almost always there's some aspect of labor trafficking going on as well. Yep. That's not a good public image for consumers to see. And to the extent that they can be brought into compliance with the fear of being exposed with something negative like that and being shut down, I think that's very powerful, and that's something the state could really use to help go beyond the E-Verify requirement.
Right, and I wish I had thought to bring this stat, but most of the jobs that have gone, creating new jobs thing, if you look at it, especially in Tennessee, over the last several years, a lot of those jobs actually went to illegal aliens. They didn't go to citizens. I don't have the numbers on that, but there were numbers on that put out a few years ago, and I haven't seen an update. But so they like to brag about, well, we created X number of new jobs, but hey, if those jobs went to illegal aliens, people need to know that. And the other thing, I didn't think it was a good idea for the AG to say that immigration is a federal issue and there's not much state can do, because that is the same garbage that a lot of our legislators have been saying for years. Well, it's a federal issue, nothing we can really do. But in the meantime, they're doing everything they can to make them feel welcome here. In-state tuition for illegal aliens has been tried more than a few times here in Tennessee. And I actually got a request that the producer brought me on a minute ago. Somebody wanted to know from the chat line what conservative legislators are allowing or supporting this abuse. I can tell you, when you're talking in-state tuition for illegal aliens, You can look at people like Senator Todd Gardenhire. He always supports that kind of garbage, as does Representative Mark White out of Memphis. But there's others, guys. There are a lot. I could not list all of them that are supportive of this stuff. But the bills, I will say this, our state legislature does a pretty good job of listing what's happened with the legislation. And you can match the names. For instance, the legislation in 2022 that gave professional license to illegal aliens, you can go and look at the votes. You can see the names on there. It's still available, and you can look for yourself. Now, some people say they didn't realize that was what they were voting for, but all the same, you vote for it, you kind of own it. I want to get to, we're all hoping that we get Trump. We're hoping that whether we find out tomorrow night, next week, January 6th, I don't know who the winner is. We're hoping it's Trump. And of course, he's talked about mass deportations. I think he's kind of walked that back a little bit. And you hit on that just a little bit. But how do you see this playing out? Because I think he will back away from it. I think he will probably focus on known criminals, terrorists, so on and so forth. I don't think we're going to see one. I'm all for one. Sign me up. I'll go help hunt him down. But I don't think we're going to see it. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, there's nowhere to go but up in terms of the number of deportations. Right. Like, just the fact that the Biden dismantling of enforcement is going to be rescinded, even that is going to make a huge difference. And, ICE officers, going to work each day are going to actually be allowed to do their job. Right. And that's going to make a huge difference because I know from my conversations with folks, the red tape is going to be gone. The prohibitions against, deporting, people who are amenable to anyone who's amenable to deportation are going to be lifted. ICE is right now doing less enforcement with more money than ever before in its history. So just freeing up these officers to do their job, they have a certain amount of capacity right now that's not being utilized. That's going to make a difference. I think messaging from the White House is extremely important. These migrants and smugglers and cartels all know that, if Trump gets elected, it's just, they're not going to have the same business opportunity, the same ability to get over here. The Border Patrol is going to start turning people back. He's going to lean on Mexico probably to start bottling up some of this. That it's going to slow down quite a bit. More people are going to be removed, and it's going to take time. But that messaging makes a huge difference. And I do think that a lot depends on what happens with the makeup of Congress. Right. Because they're going to need to provide resources to the Department of Homeland Security to ramp up immigration enforcement in order to make, to try to undo some of the mess of the last 4 years. But just stopping the flow and sending, having illegal aliens get it in their mind like, okay, I have a choice. Should I stay here and wait to be arrested and removed? Or maybe I should cut and run with the money that I've been able to earn, in the last couple of years and go back home and build that house that I want to build for my family. There's going to be some of that happen. We're going to see it really drop off a lot. And, even deportations right now from the interior are something like 100,000 a year. I don't remember the exact number. Under Obama, they were 400,000 a year. Wow. With less money. So, Trump just basically has to breathe to quadruple deportations because it's going to happen on, ICE is going to be able to do it themselves. And, and if they get more money in the next year, then they'll be able to increase it even more. And we'll see more people leave on their own than actually get physically deported. But it's going to take a while. I mean, the problem is Biden has given everybody work permits and social security numbers and said that, temporary protected status, all that stuff has to be kind of dismantled, and that'll take a couple years. But, you know, it didn't happen overnight. He can't fix it overnight. But like I said, there's nowhere to go but up.
Right. But he can make a pretty big an impact pretty quick.
Yes. And
Right.
states can too. You know, in Florida, if you watch the news coverage of the measures that Governor DeSantis and the legislature have taken there, I mean, it's all, you know, hysteria among, you know, the farmers who are hiring illegal workers, the restaurants, the construction industry. They're all like, oh my God, all our workers are leaving. You know, federal policy hasn't changed. What changed was state law. And DeSantis sending the message that we're going to crack down on this every tool we have. People are leaving on their own, and that shows that this works. It should be a model for other states. And I could give a list of, you know, 10 things that Florida has done that Tennessee could do.
Well, go ahead if you got time.
Well, one is, you know, narrowing, you know, tightening up the e-verify law, but also um, making prosecutions under the state anti-smuggling law, like and demanding that law enforcement agencies report numbers on criminal aliens who are getting arrested, and get, you know, ICE to put pressure on ICE to remove them. They issued the order to hospitals to collect information. They are cracking down on human smuggling. They're actually starting to. They convened a statewide grand jury to investigate the problem of the unaccompanied minors and the role of the NGOs in facilitating the resettlement of illegal aliens.
Yeah.
And so they're actually investigating these NGOs to make sure that they're not crossing the line from humanitarian assistance to
Promoting
really
and recruiting.
practically human smuggling. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're going to look at some of the visas that are controlled by state agencies and that serve as a gateway to certain visa programs. They've cracked down on accepting driver's licenses from other states that issue driver's licenses to illegal aliens, and then they move to Florida, and Florida's like, well, we're not taking that. So there are, you know, many ways that that states can play a role in this. I mean, I personally think that a state could create incentives for illegal aliens who are arrested for crimes to actually go home on their own, rather than have the book thrown at them for whatever crime they committed, whether it's identity theft or driving without a license or some of these lower level crimes. You could really leverage those to get illegal aliens to leave on their own.
You know, and the fact that Florida is doing this, I mean, I know that's a good little distance from Tennessee, but it's not too, if they can make it from overseas to Florida, they can certainly make it to Tennessee. It's important for Tennessee and, of course, other states to enact those type of things as well, especially in the interim until Trump gets back in and gets everything rolling, because, you know, they're not necessarily, when they leave Florida, just going to head back to their country. They're going to say, well, you know what? I hear great things about Tennessee. Their governor and their legislature, they just love us up there. I think we'll go hide out in Tennessee. So we really need to make sure that as soon as possible, and of course our session is not back in until January, that our state really cracks down. And that's not something I trust them to do without pressure from the populace. I think if we don't make it a priority,
Right.
I think then we'll probably get whatever leaves Florida will come to Tennessee, or maybe Georgia. Don't really care so much about Georgia, but I definitely care about Tennessee. So I think you're right. The states could do a whole lot more. And I thought it was a very bad idea for the AG to say there's not much states to do, because that's exactly what a lot of our legislators want to hear. That's what they've been saying the whole time. And so I really wish he had not said that. I think that's a disservice to our state. Hey, I really want to, do you have any closing thoughts? Anything you want to cover?
Just that there are things that can be done. We at the Center for Immigration Studies are more than happy to help state and local government officials or citizens groups identify these things and learn what it takes to put them into place, provide information to the extent that we can. So I hope people will look at our website at cis.org. Everything we publish is there, everything we have published. So I hope people will make use of it. And because there are things, we have to have hope and work for change, and it can be had.
Absolutely. CIS.org, correct?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's a good site. I'll definitely be looking at that and probably be talking to you some more. Hey, thanks for being with us. Thanks for all you do at CIS. I have some event announcements and information about the guests next week in just a few minutes. I want to thank the Campaign for Liberty in Memphis for inviting me to speak to their group last Monday. It was good to finally meet some people in person that I've only talked to on the phone, also to see an old friend, and it was an excellent group all around. I enjoyed the meeting, and I just want to thank you all for taking the time tonight to watch the program. Please be sure to hit the like and subscribe button as well as the notification bell so that you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. Check out our audio podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other platforms. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, TennesseeInformer.com, and you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Unless you are politically feared, you will never be politically respected. Sparta, Tennessee Political Leadership School, North End Volunteer Fire Department, 115 South Bunker Road, Sparta, Tennessee, Saturday, November 9th, 9 to 5:30 p.m. For more information on the Sparta training, email Danny Blitz at dbflies@benlomond.net or 931-316-9339. The American Legion Post 72 in Dover will host a Veterans Dinner at the Stewart County Visitors Center, 3 p.m. on November 9th. Call 931-209-8990 or email doverpost72@gmail.com. Please call by tomorrow if you plan to attend. The Stewart and Henry County chapter of the TFA will meet Thursday, November 7th, 7 p.m. at the Stewart County Visitor Center next week. Come and join us. Okay, let's see. There's one more. Okay, so next week, our guest next week will be Fred Shaw, and this is a Veterans Day show, and he's gonna tell us the story of a Stewart County veteran who became a POW in Vietnam after the treaty was signed in 1973. You'll want to hear this story. And once again, our guest is Lieutenant Colonel retired Fred Shaw. He has started a local military museum and collects not only artifacts, but true stories of local veterans. That's it for now. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.